In this episode, you'll hear some sensitive topics such as NDE, near death experiences. So, with this trigger warning, if you have little ones around, please grab your headphones now.
Well, I was playing around with my eyes. I was like opening and closing them. I was trying to see if there was a difference. And I was like, Babaji, show me. I want to see. And
Yeah.
I'm meditating, but I'm opening and closing my eyes, which is like super not the way to do it. But yeah, I just started seeing this very clear vision, eyes open or closed, of something vibrating like right next to me.
Hmm.
And I'm in a very small cave. Like
Hmm.
there's something vibrating.
Hmm.
And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, what is this?
Hmm.
What? What? And then when you're looking at a speaker that's throwing out a lot of bass and it's just like got that like real steady vibratory brrr.
Yeah.
So it was like a visual of that, but like I could almost make out like muscles and bones and things. And I was like, what? Like it hadn't clicked yet. And then
Hmm.
I saw like some eyelashes and I recognized his face and I was like, oh my God. And as soon as it clicked in my mind, gone.
Folks, this is part two of my interview with last week's guest, Rahul Panchal, a creative strategist and rebirth facilitator. Did Rahul meet Babaji? You've got to tune in and hear the second half of Rahul's incredible story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Welcome to episode 49 of the Boom Vision podcast. I'm uber excited to share this part two of Rahul's interview. What started with attending an ayahuasca ceremony to returning from his death experience, Rahul's journey of recalibrating his life 2.0 has just begun. So, how does Rahul's spiritual journey continue? Let's find out. Here's part two of Rahul Panchal's story. So, Rahul, with that death experience in this rebirth phase, like what happened in that first phase of rebirth?
So, as you can imagine, the way I was behaving and just things like that, my wife decided to leave about 6 months after that. So we were divorced
Mm,
about 6 months after that. And through that process, I realized that I wasn't going to see my kids as much. And it completely shattered something inside me, like just
mm,
absolutely shattered. And I had a panic attack, the first time I'd had a panic attack in my life. And I fainted and I woke up on my kitchen floor. I had this like hard tile floor. I woke up on my kitchen floor in a pool of blood. I'd broken my nose when I fell, and I put my nose back into spot, like it was like
yeah.
out, it was like over here, and I clicked it back in, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God. And I woke up because I was getting a call, and it was a call for an interview, right? And so I was, it was a video call, and I put a bag of peas on my face, and I got the job because like did the interview like with a bloody face, and they thought that was cool.
Oh my
But
gosh.
um, but I was just like, man, what is going on? Like, I have no idea how to handle these heavy duty emotions. I'm like, I just completely gave. I said, God, I don't know what is going on. I like almost died. Yeah, can you imagine like almost being dead, but like you didn't do anything? You were just in your house and you fell.
Right.
It was such a shock. Like it wasn't like I had a car accident or, you know, it was like another near-death experience kind of. Like that was more of like a near-death experience. But just waking up in a pool of blood in the kitchen was such a shock. And it was in the
Yeah.
middle, it was at night too. So that night, I don't know what happened, but in the morning I had three messages. One from a friend in Turkey, one from a friend in Florida, and one from a friend in Marina del Rey, which was like 15 minutes from my house at the time. So all of them said the same thing. They said, I had a dream, your face was all in my face, and you looked really sad, and I just knew I needed to reach out to you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I didn't, I was,
It felt like it was your angels and your divine team is like, all right, Amber Alert, something's up. Because I mean, to have that simultaneously and all over the world, clearly some frequency was being emitted saying like, okay, you need to check it on this guy.
yeah. I never thought this before, but as I was sharing it just now, I was thinking that other people got the message too, but only three people responded. So, they all reached out and said whatever they wanted to say. And then the one in Marina Del Rey, she's like, hey, just come over to my house. I've been recording this poem. She wrote this book of like basically like the deepest, most amazing spiritual love poems. And she told me to come over to her house and she had to play this poem for me. And so I get to her house, she puts these like teal, super soft headphones on me, and I'm just like, and this woman's like, she's got long white hair. She's a total like goddess, like she does like healing work for all these like famous people in LA. And just an amazing soul. And she's like, I don't know, like 70 or something. She's like very, very wise. And she put the headphones on me and I start listening to this poem and I just like start like crying my brains out for like a solid, I don't know, it's a long poem. I was just crying for like 30 minutes.
Mm,
Cause like, like the breakup with my ex, I never really, it wasn't like on purpose. And then on top of that, like my kids, I didn't want to ever not stop seeing my kids so much. So it was very emotional and very overwhelming.
yeah.
And so she told me, she said, hey, my old roommate from 30 years ago is in town. She teaches rebirthing, which is a breathing technique, and you should go to it because it'll help you with, your emotions and all that stuff. So I said, I'll try anything, you know, whatever. So I went to this thing. It was in the marina. It was on a boat. The whole thing was kind of weird, but kind of cute. So we're on a boat. It's me and like maybe 10 other people, and then her, this older woman and her husband, and they gave this little talk, like the first question was like, what's your most negative thought about yourself? What's your relationship with God? All these kind of like really deep and kind of triggering questions. And, I took all my notes and I was like, okay, there's something here. I'm going to go do a session with them, right? And session was, I don't know, it was pretty expensive. I don't remember how much it was, but maybe like $300. And I didn't really know what it was, but I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Man, I went there and they asked me a whole bunch more questions all about childhood and, all this kind of like psychological stuff. And I just, I did the breathing thing and just cried a whole bunch more. And then and then through the process, they're asking me what I do and stuff like that. So I told them I did advertising. And they said, hey, why don't you come to our teacher training and film it and you can help us make an online course or help us market it or whatever. And I was like, not very interested. I thought it was kind of weird, like I just, I don't know. I had an ego and, you
Mm,
know, I just wasn't like immediately accepting the thing. And so I said, I don't think I can make it. But and then they said, okay, well, we have another one in Vegas. And I was like, okay. And well, I was like, I mean, Vegas is closer than the other. The other one was like in Oregon or something. So I was like, okay, well, if you want me to do that, you're going to have to get this certain camera, right? There's this camera that's good for that sort of thing. So I kind of forgot about it. The few weeks went by and I was not really intending on going. But then everything in my life dried up, like everything.
mm.
Like all my friends were gone. Everyone was traveling. There was like none of my clients needed me. They were all like nothing. It was ghost town. Even my neighbors were all gone. Everybody was gone.
Interesting.
So I was just I was just like literally just sitting around, just twiddling my thumbs for days. Like, huh, okay. And it's never like that in my life. My life is very busy. So I called those guys and I said, hey, are you still doing the thing in Vegas? And they're like, yeah, and we got the camera you told us to get too. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm coming. And that was like the day before. So like the next day, I just hopped in my car and drove 2 or 3 hours to Vegas and did, it was almost like, I don't remember how many days it was. I think it was 3 or 5 days, something like that. So anyway, it was the teacher training, right? Like it was the training, right? So I filmed everything, took all the notes, did all the stuff. Then I got home and started editing it all. Oh, wait, before I got home, they said, we're going to be doing the advanced training in India. I'm like, So I just said, hey, you want me to come film the thing in India? By the way, this was the breathwork stuff that I
Mm-hmm.
do. This is
Mm-hmm.
where I got this is the first part of the training that I did.
No way.
Yeah, dude. So I had
Wow.
so many mind-blowing epiphanies, like
Oh my
full on,
goodness.
like
Oh, now it's all connecting. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So just okay, so like I'm trying to remember the order of things, but I think the first day I did the breathwork training, she was
Yeah.
talking about life urge and death urge. So
Yeah.
we all have a life urge, like a urge to live, and we all have a
Hmm.
death urge, like an urge to die.
Hmm.
But the death urge is kind of programmed, right? Like, old age, everyone's like, oh, you're gonna get old and die, right? So, over millennia, human beings have started to believe this. Because, like in the Bible and things like that, people lived thousands of years. Like, so how did we get into all this
Hmm.
dying so quick, right? And now it's almost like government mandated, like, oh, you're 70, time to start your death process, right? So, and in India, there's people that are like hundreds of years old, just, walking around. So it's sort of this like this choice. But so there's life urge and death urge. Life urge is the urge to live. You see this all the time, like a sick baby and the thing, it overcomes some incredible illness because it wants to live. Or like even a house plant that's almost dead. You didn't water it. You're out of town for like 2 weeks. You water it and it just fights to come back to life, right?
Hmm.
So this first day, it was very simple. I was just breathing in life urge and exhaling death urge.
Hmm. And it's first day in Vegas or first day in India?
First day in Vegas.
In Vegas. Okay, got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
you were filming this workshop or teacher workshop as a participant, but also as a like observer, kind of documenting the whole experience. Is that kind of
I went there with the intention just to film the thing and then edit
right?
it into a course that they could give to people. But
Right.
once I got there, they were just like, do the stuff. They were like, take notes. I had no intention of learning this stuff.
Ah,
I didn't
okay.
even know I was learning it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't it wasn't till India where I realized I'd learned something. I was just gathering the information and packaging it for them.
Right.
But the first day they did the whole talk. I recorded the whole talk, and there's some like note taking and stuff. I was taking some notes so I knew where to edit things and where stuff was. So I was following the information, but I wasn't like necessarily taking it in, but I wasn't not taking it in because
Hmm.
it's information, right? And then at the end, when it was time for everyone to lay down and breathe for an hour, I was just going to film that. And they were like, no, 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 we don't want to film that. Just lay down and breathe and do it. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess. Yeah. Part of me wanted to just go back to the hotel room and start editing, but whatever. So I laid down and breathed. So the first time I did this, every inhale, my vision was like mist from waterfalls and rainbows and butterflies and hummingbirds, just all of this like juicy life, like Hawaii, Bali, just sunshine, heaven
Yeah.
energy, just like spraying all over me.
Yeah.
And then every time I exhaled, just like gobs of tar were coming out of my
Wow.
nose and my mouth, just
Yeah.
so but it was like, but at the pace of the breath, right? So it
Right.
was like heavenly, juicy goodness, tar, heavenly, juicy goodness, tar, heavenly, juicy goodness, tar. And man, that one session changed my life
Wow.
because I'd just gone through all this death stuff,
Right. Right.
and I had this like I had a fascination with death for a while because I was like,
Hmm.
wow, dying was really cool. How like, how did I come back? And then when I broke my nose on my kitchen floor, like it was a lot of like death urge stuff coming up.
Hmm.
So that really helped clear all that out. Then the next day, she was talking a lot about like family patterns and the role of our parents. And, if you have any, like imagine just like a scale of 1 to 10, you know, and 10 being like totally awesome, full trust, full love, and then 0 being like full fear, hate, disgust, right? So if you just put your parents on a 1 to 10 scale, like where are you at with your mom, where are you at with your dad, right? So if you're at a 0 with your parents, you're going to have a really hard time loving yourself because you are the mixture of your parents, right? But if
Hmm.
you're at a 10 with both your mom and your dad on levels of forgiveness, resentment, like no resentment, no hard feelings, no, like you love them and it's an open flow of love energy, you're going to have a much easier time in life with your deeper levels of healing.
Hmm.
So it's a really, really foundational thing to focus on. Like, I don't know if remember from the session you were at with me where I told everyone to think about, their relationship with their mother. Like,
Yeah.
where's that at? So that in that session, we focused on mother stuff.
Got it.
So, after a whole day of filming her talk about family patterns, my question going into breathwork was, why do I have these parents? Because at the time I was so mad at my parents at this time. And I didn't
Hmm.
know, it wasn't like a good reason. It was like this little childish thing. Like, keep in mind, I just come back to life. I was
Right.
about 1 years old, like
Right.
in some ways. And I was blaming my parents for everything. I was blaming my parents for my divorce. I was blaming my parents that like I didn't know how to be a husband. But like I
Hmm.
wasn't taking any personal responsibility that I had just died and my mind got wiped and I had to like figure out how to put it all back together. Right. So
Yeah.
I was just completely, I was like just being a brat basically. So I went into this breathing thing and then I start breathing, inhale, exhale. And then I start seeing this giant hand made out of like outer space stuff. Like it was something like out of a Marvel movie, like a
Hmm.
Titan or something made out of like galaxies and universes and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't even realize it was a hand, but then I started seeing it was a hand. Then I started seeing this hand, it was like wiping. It was like going back and forth like this in front of my face. And I was like, what is this about? And then it sort of zoomed out and I could see the hand was moving these giant panels of light. And I was like, wow, what is this about? And I'm just laying there breathing, watching this unfold. And then the vision kind of pulls out a little more and I start seeing that these panels of light have these really incredible people on them, like pharaohs, kings, pirate captains, like all really cool looking people. I'm like, wow, what is going on here? And then I realized that each one of these panels of light had two people. There was a pharaoh and a queen type person, or there was like a Chinese emperor and like a emperor woman looking person. And it was couples. And I was like, why am I seeing all these couples? And why is this like galactic hand moving these things, right? And then the new screen came up and it was my parents. And I was like, wait, what? What are they doing here? And then like I stopped and I stopped scrolling, right, and and all the information started spilling out, like the DNA, the lineage, like all these cool
Yeah.
graphs and charts and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, these people are the perfect people for me to enter into for my self-realization on this thing. And I could and the vision
Wow.
kind of pulled out and I could kind of like see this like galactic like body in front of this like computer thing, like figuring out like how to, and then I saw it press the load button and load the consciousness into my mother. And
Wow. I'm getting a body chills just hearing this, by the way. And it just feels like it's like a cosmic swipe, swipe, swipe. Okay. Swipe right, right? Like that's kind of what's happening is, how
yeah,
you're
it's like
describing it.
parent Tinder. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So then they press the button, you download your parents'
No, I downloaded
information.
my consciousness into my mother's womb.
Got it.
So I got up from that breathwork thing, and the last time I'd spoken to my parents, I was in therapy or something, and I was just yelling at them about. Keep in mind, I'm like completely bonkers at this point. I just come back to life from like
Hmm.
the craziest, deepest hallucination thing ever.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I got out of this thing and I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm so sorry for not being like a great friend or human being in your life. Because I hadn't really talked to her much in like 10 years, other than like, telling her when there was a problem and I needed help or something,
Hmm.
but like I didn't really like confide in her or anything like that. So I called her and I apologized and I said, hey, I want to have a relationship with you and whatever. And that was the first time I'd done that, like in my life. So
How did she
stuff works
receive
really
it?
quick. She was down. Yeah, for the most part, we're homies now.
Yeah.
We have our disagreements, but yeah, we're really close. And I went from seeing her as like this, I don't know, I just had like just the wrong attitude about stuff. But now I'm just so blessed, feel so blessed to have her as my mother.
So from that experience in Vegas, and it sounds like that was almost like it's like another chapter of awakening there. How did that lead to India? Because you mentioned
Good question. So at the end of this
Vegas
training,
retreat, yeah, Vegas training. Like, what was the biggest takeaway you got from that?
the choosing my parents thing for sure. I mean, all of it,
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
life urge, death urge stuff. I mean,
yeah.
there was. There was other stuff too. I just can't recall it at the moment.
Okay.
But actually, here's the biggest thing. At the very end of the seminar, there was this little picture of her guru on this little table behind her. And she said, hey, I want to show you guys this picture. This is Babaji. He was Paramahansa Yogananda, wrote about him in Autobiography of a Yogi in chapter 33. And in my copy, it's on page 333. So Babaji is this immortal avatar guru who doesn't have a mother or a father. He just appears. And something about that really touched my soul on a very deep level. And I really wanted to go check it out. Also, when I first moved to LA, the first apartment I got was right next door to the Lake Shrine, which was Paramahansa Yogananda's temple. And the sign says Self-Realization Fellowship.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm self-realized. I should go hang out there. So I started hanging out there, taking my kids there every day for Sunday school, listening to the monks. It was like the only thing in life that made any sense to me at the time.
Hmm.
And, they kept mentioning Babaji because he's one of the guys on it's like Jesus and Babaji and, holy people at the front of the altar. So there was this picture of Babaji that is his incarnation in the 70s and 80s. He was there for about 15 years and he just appeared, right? The villagers and everybody, they just said, yeah, he just showed up one day. So she said, Babaji's mantra is Om Namah Shivaya, and it means I bow to the infinite in you, or I bow to the God in you, or whatever. I mentioned that was very interesting, and I wanted to learn more. And she said, well, why don't you come with us to India? That's our advanced teacher training, and we need to film that too. So I said, all right, I'm in. So yeah, they had this like trip. It was like $5,000. They just said, come. And I was just the camera guy. And
Hmm.
they did like a talk every day and different things like that. So I filmed all that stuff. But the rest of the time I was basically in a super remote village high up in the Himalayas doing the full on thing. Like they really wanted me to just do the stuff, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
everywhere I went, I filmed some stuff too, but like, I was deep in it. So the first day I got there, like there's this very elaborate altar and, everybody's like bowing to this photograph of Babaji. And I'm just like, what is this all about? This is so bonkers. Like it was like beyond, when you think something's like, oh, that's a little culty.
Hmm.
This was like the most turbo, over the top, devotional. It was so devotional and so just so over the top that it wasn't even culty. It was beyond. It was like it was just
Hmm.
so beyond. It was
Yeah.
so beyond, and I just I didn't know what it was. I couldn't grasp it,
Hmm.
and I wanted to. I wanted to understand why how these people were so devoted. And so we had this opportunity to meditate in the cave where Babaji was like found, right? And when I say cave, I'm not talking like a big thing. I mean, this thing was tiny, like just sitting there in a meditation position is like that's the end of the cave, and it's
Yeah.
just this, it's like maybe 20 feet in. So there's like this tiny little altar in there. Like there's like, stick incense and a little pitcher or something. It's tiny. And it's so dark in there, you can't even really see. It's not like your eyes are open and
Hmm.
like so anyway, I'm in this tiny, tiny little super dark little like woomy space in this mountain with like temples and stuff built all on the top of it. But I'm down there and I'm just praying. I'm like, Babaji, I don't understand any of this stuff. Everyone here has been drinking the Kool-Aid super hard. I don't get it. Can you show me? Like, I don't understand how everyone's praying to you and thinks that you appeared with no parents. Like, how do you just appear out of thin air? I just really don't get it. Can you show me? And like on this trip, my goal was for Babaji's to like beam in front of me and just be like,
Yeah.
"What's up, dog?"
So you go into this meditation cave, you had this thought in mind, and then so you expressed it, right? And
Yeah.
so what happened next?
Well, I was playing around with my eyes. I was like opening and closing them. I was trying to see if there was a difference. And I was like, Babaji, show me. I want to see. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm meditating, but I'm opening and closing my eyes, which is like super not the way to do it. But yeah, I just started seeing this very clear vision, eyes open or closed, of something vibrating like right next to me.
Hmm.
And I'm in a very small cave. Like it is,
Hmm.
there's something vibrating.
Hmm.
And I'm like looking at, I'm like, what is this?
Hmm.
What? What? And then you know, when you're looking at a speaker that's throwing out a lot of bass and it's just like got that like real steady vibratory brrr.
Yeah.
So it was like a visual of that, but like I could almost make out like muscles and bones and things. And I was like, what? Like it hadn't clicked yet. And then
Hmm.
I saw like some eyelashes and I recognized his face and I was like, oh my God. And as soon as it clicked in my mind, gone.
Wow.
Yo, after that, I was on my knees, dude, bowing in front of that picture and
You're
like crying. Like,
the Kool-Aid hit.
yeah, I was just eating the dust from the packet at that point.
Wow. So it's like, yeah, once you made that conscious connection of, oh, that vision is material, because that vibration is really there. That's when you connected the dots where like, oh, that's actually him. Then it's like it served a purpose, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, you can just, if you stare at the cloudless sky for enough time, you'll watch a cloud form from nothing. You'll watch
Hmm.
millions of gallons of heavy water, millions of pounds of water just form into a shape, right? Sometimes it looks
Hmm.
like a dragon or whatever, but I saw that. I saw a human being do that right in front of me. And it wasn't just that he did it in front of me, it was also that, like, as soon as it clicked, as soon as I had the recognition, he was like, all right, you got enough. I got like divine stuff to do. And, like it's like he just put a grenade into all of my doubt,
Yeah.
blew it up, and was like, peace, I'm out. It was like the most ultimate mic drop ever. He's just
Wow.
he's so cool. Like he's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even have to see him fully to see him. I mean, it was just
Right.
enough. Like it was
Right.
just enough. He just gave me
Right.
a glimpse. So the rest of that trip, I mean, this was like a 2 week trip. The rest of the trip, I was just like full tears, just full like, wow, God's real. Holy moly, whack-a-mole. Like just, like there's something way outside of my perceptions of Matrix or whatever. Just
Hmm.
there's something going on here. So at some point, I was like, man, maybe I'm just never gonna leave here. I'm just gonna stay at the ashram forever. And then it came time to leave, and so I got in the Jeep and started driving down the mountain, and I just got so sick. I did not want to leave at all. Like,
Hmm.
and then we got to the hotel. We got to this nice hotel, and I just like laid down and just
I want to go back.
no, I was like just full on like nonstop diarrhea. Like my body was
Oh.
just like so upset.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was really hard to leave.
Hmm.
Um, so then I got back to LA and started editing all this stuff together and, watching all these talks from monks and all this, just great information. I got it all together for this teacher and she was like, yeah, I don't like any of it. She had just shaved her head as part of the spiritual process. And she's like, I don't want to have any of the stuff with my head shaved. And it's all like amazing stuff. So not only did I get to go to the training, I went to the advanced training. Then I spent months like going through the material like line by line, like making it all, yeah. So, oh, you know what? I skipped something really important.
Hmm. What's that?
So back in India, before we left,
Now, this is
it's still at the
prior or
ashram.
after the hotel? Oh, it's at the after. Okay, got it.
It's still at the ashram. Haven't got to the hotel yet.
Yeah,
Haven't lost my bowels.
yeah,
Um, so we're still at the ashram, and some of the young monks from that were not part of her trip, like she
right.
had this like $5,000 program where she would take people to India to go experience this. But there were some monks there who were just curious about it, and I was, they were my age, and I was just talking to them about stuff. And they were like, "Hey, we want to try this breathing thing." So I was like, "Okay, let me ask if you can come." So I asked her. I said, "Hey, can these guys come?" And she said, "No." She said, everyone that's coming, that's doing this thing with us is they paid a lot of money to be here, But she said, listen, you're trained, so just go do a thing for them. That'll be your karma yoga, right? So every day at the ashram there was
Mm,
karma yoga. So like some days you would help cook, some days you would help clean up
right,
the temple,
right,
some
right.
kind of service thing. So she was like, that could be your karma yoga. Just go help people with the breathing stuff. So I did, and I mean, it was really easy because they were monks, and we were in like a super sacred, holy place. So like there was no like exorcism going on or any like,
Right.
nothing crazy going on. So
Yeah.
I was like, cool, I can do this. So anyway, leave the ashram, get back to LA, edit all the stuff. I'm steeped in the knowledge. I did a couple, things with it. Like I had a friend that was going through something and I did it for them. And
And when
then
you say did it for them, you're talking about like actually facilitating a breathwork session, right?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
So I just want to clarify that. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, so the one you were at with like, there was like 25, 30 people.
Yeah.
I didn't start doing stuff like that till years later. At first, because I was trained in a very one-on-one, very deep kind of way. So
Oh, so it wasn't like in a group setting per se. It was more of like, hey, in a smaller group or even individual. That's what you mean by
yeah, the first time I did it was individual. The second time I did it was just with a group of
right. Okay.
trainees, but it wasn't like, like a party, like
Got it.
how I play music and it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like that. It's quiet.
Got it.
So, so I had a friend, I don't remember what they were going through, but I was like, hey, I can do this breathwork thing that I learned in India. And they're like, okay, cool. So I did it. Then I got invited to I had a client that was a coach and he did this like biohacking thing. I don't know. They'd rented this like gigantic like log cabin for 30 people.
Hmm.
And so they every day they had some different thing. And he was like, hey, come out and do your breathing thing at this. So it was like me and like, I don't know, like 20 entrepreneurs. And I just led them all through a session. And it was awesome, dude. It was awesome. Because these guys, they were in that part of their life where they need a lot of deep healing.
Yeah.
And they weren't on the path to that yet. And so
Hmm.
it was like full on like hospital time. Like everybody was letting go of so much stuff, people crying, people
Hmm.
a little bit of screaming, but it was really good. And I loved it. I loved it. But I was still so, I guess my head was still kind of in the matrix of doing commercial
Hmm.
work
Hmm.
and advertising work and things like that. So I was still looking for that, pursuing that. And about a year after that, I didn't do much with the breath work. I just did like just those few sessions.
Hmm.
And I felt really, really lost. Like
Hmm.
super lost. I didn't know what to do with my life. None of like I had the most blessed advertising career ever. Like my first job out of college was at the best agency on earth, and I won every award you can imagine. Then I got recruited to the other best agency on earth and did stuff for Nike and like, crazy stuff. And I had tons of awards out of like just nowhere. Like God just gave it to me. Like I mean, yeah, I was focused and yeah, I worked hard, but it was a gift. It was a real gift from God, this career I had. And I was at this point in my life where like none of the advertising stuff was working out.
Hmm.
Like none of it. Like I was applying to jobs, my recruiters, like just it just was off. The switch for that stuff, like the tap had been turned off.
Well, it feels like it's because your energetic frequency that you're emitting back then versus at that stage you're in, it's evolved,
Yeah,
right?
of course, of course.
Yeah.
But also like high school ended and college started, right?
Mhm.
So you don't
Yeah.
get to go to the same playground anymore.
Right.
So one day I was fast asleep and I was awoken by the brightest light you can imagine. But I hadn't even opened my eyes yet. I'm sleeping and it's just
Wow.
super bright,
Yeah.
like unbelievably bright.
Yeah.
Like almost like imagine like someone putting like a police light in your brain,
Yeah.
just shining it right into your eyeballs. So I'm sleeping and I'm like, what is this? What is going on? And I'm afraid to open my eyes because I feel like maybe there's like some kind of, I don't know, ambulance or something outside, like shining a light into my bedroom. And it's like, so I opened my eyes real slow and the room was dark,
Hmm.
completely dark. And I'm like, what is going on? I close my eyes again, full illumination, like just beyond bright. Like it hurt my eyes to close my eyes. So I just kept my eyes open. I looked at my phone and it was exactly 4 a.m. And my heart skipped a beat because 4 a.m. is the time at the ashram where they would blow one of the monks would blow into like a conch shell and make this very distinct sound. And everyone would
Hmm.
wake up, everyone would go start bathing and getting ready for the 5 a.m. ceremony.
Hmm.
So I just got chills all over my body and I could feel Babaji's presence. And I said, all right, today's going to be like an ashram day. So I put on my swim trunks and got ready to go to the beach. I was living in Venice Beach, so I could just walk to the water. So at the ashram, I would put on my trunks at 4 a.m. and go dip in the river. It was one of the tributaries that fed the Ganges,
Hmm.
but way, way, way up in the Himalayas. It was cold, like super cold water, and you just dunk in there and chant Om Namah Shivaya and just deal with it, and then you get ready for day of prayer. So I did the same thing. I just put on my trunks, started walking to the beach. It's like a 5-minute walk. On the way, I saw some homeless people that were kind of like drinking beers and wiping the blood off their faces and stuff. Like it looked like they'd been fighting or something. I don't know. Pretty rugged stuff. And, so I'm walking up to them on the street. They're about 100 feet in front of me. And then one of them starts screaming, "Hey, go back to India! Go back to India!" And, this is Venice Beach in like, the 2000s or whatever. I don't remember the year exactly, but I was just like, huh, this is mildly racist. Like like, is this for real? So I just crossed to the other side of the street and I was like, doo doo doo, I'm having my divine day. I woke up the coolest way ever, you know? So I go jump in the water, do my Om Namah Shivayas and say my prayers and then, sit around and wait for the sun to come up and watch the sun come up and do some sun gazing. And it's just totally blissy,
Hmm.
just, receiving the love of creation all around me. And then I start walking back to my house. And I had run into one of my neighbors. So I'm talking to him and I'm looking at him. And then I walked right into the homeless guy that was yelling, "Go back to India." And I almost fell over. I hit him so hard.
Oh,
And he looked at me and he's about, I don't know, 6 inches, 8 inches in front of my face. And I'm looking into his eyes. He's looking into my eyes. And I, uh, I don't know how to put it, but it was like I completely dissolved into this like state of love, like I had never felt more seen, more loved, more understood,
hmm.
all at once. It was just everything. It was just pure bliss. It was really bliss. Like I was looking in this guy's eyes, and it wasn't like looking at someone's eyes. It was this infinite depth. And I I just was kind of bathing in it, like just totally in it. And and then he said with a smirk, I saw he like smirked, like he was joking, and he said, "Go back to India." And I'm like, still just lost in his eyes, right? Like just and I mean, the guy's got like cuts on his face, and he smells like alcohol,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I'm like lost in this guy's eyes, like what is going on? And I didn't really react when he did the go back to India thing, so he whispered just so I could hear him. He said, "Om Namah Shivaya." And I just put my hands on my face like, oh my God, is this for real?
No
And then when I
way.
and then when I pulled my hands off my face and looked around, dude was gone. And I'm on
No.
Venice Beach, like where does he go? Like you can see in all directions for a while. I mean, it's not like he ran, like I couldn't, I still can't put it together. So so I'd heard stories at the ashram of Babaji coming to people in the form of a homeless man or dressed really weird or something really weird about him. And in one of the books I have about him, it talks about how he'll do these goofy things to see if you're going to judge it or go with it. Whatever. It just it struck me as some kind of super divine thing. So it's kind of funny, right? I have these like monks on WhatsApp, right? So I message these guys. I'm like, "Hey, this is what just happened. I woke up in like a field of pure light at 4 a.m. I went to the beach to go do my little prayers. And then a homeless man body checked me and told me to go back to India. What do I do with this information? I'm overwhelmed. This is like, what is going on?" And so all the monks, they write back and they say, "Well, obviously go back to India." And I'm like, "Oh, it's that simple, huh?"
Oh my goodness. I feel like this is the backstory and the creation of the pure white light, man.
It is.
My God. So I wanna go there, but I remember you were saying there's this Himalaya trip. Is this the next chapter you're about to share? Is
This is the second Himalaya trip.
Okay, got it.
We just had one Himalaya trip where I got trained
Right,
in breath work, like super deep.
right.
About a year later, Babaji comes to me on the beach and body checks me and tells me to go back to India. So I don't know where to go in India. I'm like clueless. I'm like, do I go to Calcutta? Do I go to South India? And the monks are like, no, just come back to the ashram.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're like, yeah, there's a big festival in like 2 weeks, so get over here. So I get my butt to India. I'm sitting there meditating and I'm praying and I'm doing all the stuff. And there's all these breathwork people there, like most of the people are just there doing the regular chanting and stuff. But then there's like a crew of healer breathwork people. So one of the guys from Italy, he's like, hey, we're gonna do breathwork on the roof at sunset. And I'm like, sweet, I'm there. So go up to the roof. The sun is setting over the Himalayas. It's like just beautiful, dude. Like
Mm,
it's unbelievable. And then the energy of this place is just it's oh man.
magical.
Yeah, it's almost like you're not on Earth. It's like Shangri-La or something.
Hmm.
So I lay down, I start doing the breathing, and nothing's happening. No visions, no nothing, nothing, not even any, no, my hands aren't cramping. Like I've also been breathing a lot at this point. So like I've moved through a lot of the kind of reaction stuff. And so I just started talking to God. I'm like, God, you body checked me on the beach and told me to come back to India. Why am I here? And what's going with my advertising career? And like, like, what is going on? Like, what do I do with my life? You gave me this amazing advertising career, and then you gave me this amazing perspective and faith, and like, you annihilated all my doubts. But what do I do? Like, I don't get it. I don't know how to put these things together. They're so disparate.
Mm.
And dude, like Superman, literally Babaji just flew. Like my eyes are closed, but I know where the mountains are and stuff. So I just kind of saw this vision of Babaji in these white flowing robes, like Superman, fly over the Himalayas and then come to a floating resting place, just like about a foot in front of my face. And all the robes are flowing over him. And he looks at me and he says, when you get back to LA, start teaching breath work. And I'm like,
Oh,
what? And then I start seeing visions of like little like posters and things to say and
yeah.
like having people like I started seeing all these like people living at my little studio apartment with me. I
Hmm.
was like, what? Like he was basically like start an ashram in your studio apartment. I was like, yeah, okay. So at first I was pretty motivated. Once I got that message at the ashram, the next day I'm down and we're doing this thing where we sing for like an hour. We just sing all these prayers. So I'm down there singing and I'm like, I'm just getting this really steady, consistent feeling that I'm done at the ashram and there's something else I need to accomplish in India while I'm in
Mm.
India. So I text my cousin and my cousin's like the coolest dude ever. I'm like, hey, I think I'm done at the ashram. I need to see everyone in the family. And so he just wrote back with like flights and stuff, and he had a driver pick me up from the airport, drive me 8 hours up into the mountains. So I just hopped in the car with the driver, drove to the airport, 8 hours to the airport, and then I went and saw my aunt and my cousins and just everyone in India. So the last time I'd come to India, I didn't visit anybody. I just went to the ashram, then went home.
Mm.
And they all were kind of like bothered by that.
Mm.
But, I just come back to life, man. I had no sense. So, um, so I stayed with everybody and I stayed with my aunt and I told her everything that had been going on, right? Like how I died and came back to life. And then I told her, I don't know if I mentioned this in our last call, but when I was dead, I went through all of my DNA and I found a little problem, a little
Mm.
error. So, I went through all of, that you hear about when people die, they go through all of the stuff of their
Right.
life.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Right.
I was going through all the stuff in my life, but also seeing how that affected my DNA, like
Yeah.
how that was all coded into my DNA, everything of my life. And then I went into my parents' life, then I went into my grandparents' lives,
Mm.
and then I went into my great grandparents' lives. And in there was a problem. And so I'm at my aunt's house, who I hadn't seen since I was 18.
Hmm.
And I'm telling her all this stuff. And I was so emotional. I was like crying and da da da. And she's crying. And because she knew what was going on, she was like one of the only people in the family that knew what was going on.
Mm.
Because everyone else I talked to in the family about this kind of didn't really give me a straight answer.
Mm.
So she said, yeah, uh, basically, my great grandmother had burned alive.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a kitchen accident, like you know, things happen. Uh-oh,
Yeah.
right? But at that time in India, you know, people were burning themselves alive in the streets, like, like it was like a women's rights kind of thing. Like if a
Oh
woman
my
was
gosh.
mistreated for a year, this it was normal for women to be very mistreated, so they would just burn themselves in like a protest. So some people in the family thought it was something like that. Some people thought, whatever. So there was a lot of stories around what this was, what it meant, was what the intentions were, and
Yeah.
things. So it created a lot of drama in the family. So like like a good Indian family, everyone decided just not talk about it.
Mm.
So when I first asked my father about this, about a year after coming back, my dad just cried for like he just cried. It was like the first time he'd been able to cry about this. He'd been
Mm.
allowed to cry about this. It was interesting because it was like watching a little kid cry, but it was my dad. It was cool. It was amazing. So I talked to my aunt about this, and she was like, she said something like, I knew this was what it was about, right? So she told me how in the family, every time one of my dad's brothers conceived a boy, the boy was born dead. Yeah. So all of my uncles have a dead baby boy in their life.
No way.
Yeah. So for 30 years, so my dad's sisters, they could have boys. All my dad's sisters have boys. So my older male cousins are, none of them have my last name,
Yeah. Right. Got
right?
it.
But
Okay.
I'm the first boy in my family with my last name
Wow.
in this line. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Right.
there's cousins and stuff that are not
Right.
in this paternal line, but so there was something about that, right? So she said everybody was having this problem, and then she had one, like I think the child was born without a brain or something pretty
Wow.
pretty gnarly. And so she said, and she's super devoted. Like every morning she wakes up, she's doing like 45 minutes of prayers every morning.
Yeah.
Like this woman's so devoted. And she told me that after her, I don't know what you call it, miscarriage or stillbirth, or
Yeah.
I don't know the technical term, but she told me after it happened, she hired a priest to do a ceremony to heal the family, right? To
Right.
heal this thing. So that night I had these dreams of the prayer ceremony, and the prayers were almost like written into little scrolls by angels above the thing, and they were sent up past
Mm.
the different layers of gods and gods and gods and angels and all the stuff, all the way up to the infinite one.
Yeah.
And then when it got to the highest, he just said, "All right," and just like peeled like like a layer, like almost like a snake would peel off a layer of skin, like just
Hmm.
just pulled off a layer from his face, and that little fractal of him was me, and I got sent down to this family to heal this thing, right? Because in the prayers they asked for a solution, and so I got sent down, and then after me, all my younger cousins are boys with my last name.
Oh, so you were the one that sort of kickstarted breaking from that old cycle.
Right, but I never really understood that. Like as a kid, my dad would say, "Oh,
Right.
you're the first boy." Like
Yeah.
it was mentioned, but I didn't understand all of the context and
Right. Right.
you know.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and all my male younger cousins, they all have little boys too, which is super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So as your aunt was describing and giving you this context, do you feel that part of experience with did you say it was your great grandmother
It's my
or
great
grandmother?
grandmother, my
Great
dad's
grandmother.
grandmother.
Yeah. So do you feel that that part then got healed or
Yeah,
okay.
big time. Big time.
Yeah.
I think that was maybe the main reason I got told to go to India.
Mm,
And it wasn't just that. I talked about this with everyone in my family on Earth, like India, America,
yeah.
like all over.
Yeah.
So I always talk about every family function. I mention it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't know about it, I'm like, "Oh, you don't know about this?" And I tell them. Like I was at my uncle's 50th wedding anniversary, like last fall,
Yeah.
and he both of his kids are doctors, right? Like
Yeah.
he's a very successful guy, and so he's like, "Hey, what's going on with you? Like what are you up to these days?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm you know just coming back to life." He's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, I died 8 years ago and I came back." And he's like, "You died?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "How come nobody told me this?" And then, his son is like, yeah, he died. And then he was like, what is that even? Like, how would you even know that? And he was like, well, he's like, how can you even prove that? I'm like, well, I know that so-and-so burned alive. And he was like, I didn't know so-and-so burned alive. I thought she just died. And everyone was like, no, he's been talking about this for years. She burned alive and everyone knows it. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that even in the family, like, like elders in the family don't even know about this.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
right. It's amazing when, especially, I mean, I find in like Asian culture, there's always things said and things not said. And if you don't allow the space for that energy to release, it'll carry on for generations until it gets addressed. And so before attending we'll get into this in a little bit about, pure white light and your breath work. Amazing sessions, man. I was co-hosting the family constellation workshop with one of my previous guests, Dr. Yvonne, and it's just about how to be able to address generational trauma because that energy, whether you know it or not, consciously, subconsciously, it's the way we described it in that interview was it's like having that flight recorder pass on each generation and you're carrying this U-Haul of all the different ones and it's in like part of your DNA and knowing or not knowingly it will get expressed if a certain experience or things get come up but without that release of energy it'll keep carrying on and then given your death experience but be able to see that coding and that addressing but be able to share it openly so people can just have that release then yeah there's so much healing with that
Hmm.
but it requires that first awareness.
Hmm.
Right. And then once you have that awareness, then the willpower to want to change it with that. So, wow. So you were saying at this 50th anniversary, he's having an aha moment because he's like, wait, what's going on with part of our history? So you're able to address that. And so what led after that event?
Well, so whenever I go up and visit my family, I just say, hey, if anybody wants to do some breathing, I'll
Yeah.
do it. Because I used to make like commercials and stuff, and now
Right.
I don't know. My family's like, are you okay? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm like, hey, I'll show you guys what I do. And
Mm.
like my cousins that are like doctors and engineers and very, educated, well-paid people. I like to think of them as people that keep the matrix going.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, they lay down and they breathe and they see some colors and see some lights and I share with them stories and
Yeah.
it's interesting.
So let's segue into that because from that, how did that lead to the creation of the pure white light? So tell me a little bit more about how that actually got started and the experiences with that. Because I had the blessing of attending one of your breath work and one of many to come. And so I'd love to hear what's the origin story on that workshop because it felt like, yeah, the two trips from Himalayas and meeting with Babaji multiple times in different forms, it's like that sort of sparked this movement of this current chapter you're in, right?
Yeah. I mean, how do I put this? Not, I think telling people, hey, fast on fruit for a couple years, then do ayahuasca and kind of like kill yourself is not really very repeatable. So I wanted to create a container where people could go just as deep as where I've gone, but in a safer, doable way. And, you know, uh, I've had experience like through the integration of this coming back into my body, I've had so many magical experience just through breathing, right? Like I remember I had one session where I was like trying to figure out where I was like, I had a few girls I've dated since coming back. They've said, you've got some anger in you. And so I kept asking, what is this anger, right? Because most people who meet me don't mention it's just in relationship. So I breathed into it and I asked, I said, God, please show me what is this anger? What is this? And I went through different relationships and different partnerships and I mean like work partnerships, right? Like just different human connections. And I got down to this point where I was an infant in my mother's arms and she had made the decision to give up on breastfeeding me and to switch me to bottle feeding. And I accessed this incredible pool of rage inside this little infant part of me that was acting out in intimate relationships. So to get something like that out, it's life-changing, right?
Mm.
Another thing, another breathing thing I had learned that being circumcised is a birth trauma, right? Like you're born and then the most sensitive part of your body gets cut off pretty roughly. And so I breathed into that and I was like, God, just show me what that is, right? And I had this crazy session where I relived my tip of my penis being cut off and I was being held down by a giant, right? Because I was like a little infant. This hand was as big as my whole torso, holding me down while someone else cut me up. And I relived it and just like let it go. And then after I saw all these past lives, like I don't know how to put it. It was almost like imagine someone fanning the pages of a book in front of
Yeah.
you, but
Mhm.
each page of the book was the ceiling of a cathedral in another lifetime where I had been circumcised.
Whoa.
Hundreds of cathedrals. So I remember being a baby looking up at all these amazing ceilings
Yeah.
and just them all fanning by, and I saw my little legs in the air and just letting it all go. Like just letting go of all of that.
Hmm.
So, these gifts that are able to be received through this practice are life-changing, like
Yeah.
completely life-changing. So I want to, there's really just nothing more rewarding that I found in my life than this. I've done other entrepreneurial things and just nothing's really kept my attention like this. This is just, it's, I feel very blessed and honored to be trusted with this ability that was
Right.
just given to me. Like, I never, I wasn't one day I didn't wake up and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a breathwork teacher. And, I don't even like calling what I do breathwork because you don't really have to do like quote unquote breathwork in the session. You can
Hmm.
just be there. The breathing helps. It catalyzes it for sure, but it's not required.
Hmm. So walk me through if I have never experienced one of your workshops or anything related to that, right? From a layman's perspective, like what can someone expect in a session? Because I want to bring more awareness. I want to shine more light into this beautiful work that you do. So if you can describe a little bit of just what is it like?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. And so every step of this process is very curated and calculated and guided and there's a lot that goes into every step because
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, "Oh, can I skip this step or can I do that step?" I'm like, "No, can you please just do the whole thing because it helps the whole thing happen." I've tested it
Right.
with it, without it. I've done this
Yeah.
thousands of times.
Yeah.
So step 1, you go and you register, right?
Yeah.
So there's an energetic thing that happens when you pay.
Yes.
And especially when you pay before, there's
Hmm.
a big difference between paying before and paying after. You could
Hmm.
pay before, right? You have to open the door, right?
Yes.
Energetically.
That's right.
You are energetically contributing to your healing, to your thing, right?
Hmm.
So you pay and then you show up and the first thing you do is you sign a waiver that says you might die and if you do die, you have to come back, right? That's very important. I found that when I don't have that, people don't go as deep because there isn't the safety of, this acknowledgement that we're going to go really deep.
Hmm.
It's really interesting. I mean, it's been fun over the years testing these things and, you know, seeing what works and what doesn't work. So everyone signs a waiver. A new thing I'm experimenting with now is I have people put on a scale of like 1 to 5 where they are with their parents. So
Hmm.
far, I'm loving the results.
Hmm.
It just helps people get really into that.
Yeah.
Because the three main things the three foundational pieces to this work are one, just realizing that you're breathing in life force energy. You're not just breathing in air, you're breathing in like God, right? You're breathing in prana, you're breathing in the force of creation, right? So
Hmm.
you're amplifying that within yourself. That's step 1. Step 2, birth trauma, right? Getting out all that stuff from forceps, circumcision, C-section, drugs, anything that went into making your birth anything less than a pure, natural, divine experience that your soul expected when your soul came here and got slapped around and sensitive body parts cut off and, just rushed, drugged. So a lot, I'd say most people are experiencing some sort of foundational trauma that's affecting everything in their life. So
Hmm.
once you get birth trauma figured out, that starts like, if you've been in therapy for years and just certain things just aren't moving, it's just look at birth trauma, right? Like those patterns that keep coming up, birth trauma.
Interesting.
Even if your life is going perfect and you got, great income and everything's groovy, but there's that little thing that you're not sure what it is, look into birth trauma. Birth trauma is a big deal.
Hmm.
So this thing clears birth trauma. In about 10 sessions, birth trauma is out of your system, which is just, that's really the mission, is like, how do we get this out of the system of the collective consciousness? Because I feel like every person that clears this stuff out of their system, they're now a more harmoniously tuned tuning fork, just in all
Yeah.
your relationships, like thousands of people that are affected by your presence. It just makes a big change. And then the third biggie with this work is just harmonizing with the reality of your mother and father.
Hmm.
Just getting straight that, on some level you picked them, whether it's a very deep, super out there spiritual level or whatever. And there's things to let go of, right? We all have some resentment, right? Because we have so much expectation on our parents, but our parents are just as flawed and goofy and weird as we are, right? Like,
It's interesting you say it that way too. I get what you mean. And I think part of it might be we have certain expectations of parents because maybe growing up they had certain expectations of us. So it's almost like a mirroring kind of bouncing back of that energy. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, yeah, no. I mean, the way you broke it down to those three pillars really makes a lot of sense because that can either clear the foundation that you're building things on, or if you're still a bit on rocky foundation. Wow. Okay. So prompting them with some of these questions to have an awareness of what state they're in sort of these three areas, right? And then, so after signing the waiver, prompting with questions, and then,
Then I just kind of explain the basics, right? So people, we're gonna breathe and we're gonna inhale and exhale through our mouth. And the mouth breathing is more if you're trying to release unconscious trauma, right?
hmm,
So that's a great way to go with group work because, you know, why not get all that out, right? Because people don't
yeah,
even know it's there. In private work, I have people breathe through their nose if they're trying to get over sleep apnea or snoring
hmm,
or
okay,
certain birth trauma things. Sometimes I do it in group work, but not as often. But through the process, we alkalize our system a lot, right? So when you exhale CO2, CO2 is the foundational molecule for acid and for fat, right? So when we do this breathing, your system's going to alkalize because a lot of acid is leaving your system, and also you'll lose weight. I had a obese person in a session, and she lost 5 pounds in one session.
no way.
Yeah. I mean, but she had 5 pounds to lose, like I don't think
Yeah.
everyone, that's not normal, but
And that's like
um
over like, and usually your sessions are 2 to 3 hours. Is that right?
yeah, I mean it's 1 hour breathing, but
I see.
it's
Got it.
it's community. People hang
Yeah.
out and
Yep.
it's fun. People talk, people share. It's the best part about it's the community, right? Like the
Yeah.
biggest I'd say the biggest disease in our culture is lack of community or absence of community, right? Because we're all kind of kept apart.
Yeah.
So we breathe through the alkalization and deacidification process of your body starts to freak out, right? Because your body wants homeostasis, right? That's why they say eat slow, drink slow, because you don't throw your body out of whack, right? So when you
Mm.
drink slowly, your body can actually hydrate. If you drink water really fast, you just go to the bathroom right away, just pee it out. So with this breathing, we're bringing in a lot of alkaline life force energy. And so depending where you're at in your body with your health, you might get a lot of signals for your body to stop doing this, to get up, to do anything but this,
Mm.
because your body wants to maintain homeostasis. So you have to come in like the emperor of your body. Paramahansa Yogananda talks about this, about how your consciousness is the emperor of your body, and you have to lead your body and get
Mm.
over these sensory grippings to comfort, right? So you lead your body and you say, hey, body, now this is something we're doing. So you got to just chill out and deal with it. And what happens in the session, sometimes, especially if you're dealing with, if birth trauma is coming up and things like that, your hands will start cramping, your face might start cramping. You might even feel the forceps grabbing your head. You
Mm.
might feel, you'll relive your birth. It's very common to relive birth. And you just got to hold still and just let it happen, right? Because if you move or start getting too engaged with it, you're not observing it, right? So you got
Yeah.
to feel it to heal it, right? You got to really
Yeah.
observe it. You got to be with it. So you hold as still as possible and let this thing happen. Something that I like to do is I invite in angels, doctor spirits, Archangel Raphael, he's the archangel of healing. He has an infinite army of doctors from all the realms that can come and heal anything. So invite these guys in, right? We literally open a container, a pillar of light for them to enter into the space. And, I give everyone instructions on how to allow that and how to, be open to that in sessions. In the sharing after, people talk about how they could feel surgical stuff happening, right? Sometimes you see it. I've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm feeling the body chills because I'm remembering my first session with you, right? It was our mutual friend Tian that enrolled me in our spiritual tribe to attend your breath work, and I remember, everyone when we went around the room afterwards, and everyone's kind of debriefing of what their experience was like. Some people were describing about seeing these vivid colors, right? Some people were talking about, yeah, like as if like you're in this like spiritual operating room and they're just kind of helping you kind of, operating and healing your body and your soul. And then for me, I think what I shared was it felt like I was in this spiritual concert because sound for some reason for me was just, whether it's the what do you call it? Is it sound bowls?
Hmm. Yeah.
Right, you had that, but then the music choices, some was more meditative music, but then I think you were playing this one, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I remember just playing that song, and then the person laying next to me, just it was like this angelic voice. I'm like, what's going on? It feels like I'm in like this live concert. It was unreal. It was divine. And for me, like you were saying, my body in the first half an hour went through that, where my hands was a bit constricted as I went through that phase. But then just having deep breaths, like where, my stomach is rising, before I never really had that feeling and that, in breathing, but something about this just kind of helped open that gateway for me. And so I'm just sharing a little bit of tidbit of just my personal experience. And I remember just going through and I was like, oh my God, people just need to know more about this. That's why I'm so happy you're on the show and just being able to share, what you do, because aside from birth trauma and potentially your parent trauma, like when people think about breath work, what do you find people think it is, but what's really the root of what you're hoping people would take away from with it? Is it usually people don't have misconceptions of it, or no, like it's just really simple, and it's just more of just going on this journey? What would be the best way to describe for someone that has never had it before? Because you mentioned before about you don't like labeling it as breath work, right? So what's a better, easy way for them to describe about, hey, why don't you give this workshop a try or this session a try? Like, how do you best describe that?
I mean, so I've been to a bunch of breathwork things,
Yeah.
and they are so fun. There's like a lot of different biohacking things and different ways to play with your breath and ways to make yourself really dizzy and hyperventilate and do all these kind of things. We don't do any of that. You've been to my session. We just lay down and inhale and exhale and things start happening, right?
Yeah.
We don't do any of the work in breath work. Like, Wim Hof, he has this process where you take 20 big breaths and then you hold your breath and then you get super dizzy and then you can go like be naked in the snow, right?
Mm,
Because that process, what that does is it cranks up your cortisol response and makes you invincible, right? Like you
mm,
could lift up a car or something. And it's cool. It's cool to know how to do that if you want to like turn on your superhuman abilities. But what I like to help people do is I like to guide people on a path to their own self-realization.
yeah.
I like to help people see that they're bringing more of that God force into themselves, nourishing that light within themselves, and
Mm,
see where that takes them, right? Because everyone's story and journey is so vivid and different and magical, right? So for me, it's not about like biohacking or, whatever. And maybe it's just because of my path, right? But I really am drawn to the deeply spiritual side of it.
Yeah. What's coming to me as I'm listening to you talk is that how I would describe the experience, the more I think about it, is yeah, there's a lot of different intentions depending on what breath work might mean for what that workshop's designed for. But I think for the one that you facilitate, what's coming to me is it's like we're operating this physical body. So there's that outer layer of that. If we just sort of put that on pause and almost like, put that body to rest. And then there's another layer of call it ego. All right, well, you can let go of your hands of that and who is that inner spirit soul that you have? Okay, how do we connect that with this life force out there? Because you're otherwise going to have these certain layers that are sort of filtering and barriers of it. But going through that, the way you facilitated breath work is just you're just breathing and resting still. And it's almost like letting go of those controllers of the physical body and the ego and just like really just connect that inner, whatever you want to call it, inner child, inner spirit, and just reconnect and remembering, right? So, you're using the word self-realization. There's beauty to that purity of it. Just wanted to share that because I feel that's kind of,
I love that. Yeah.
does that resonate? Kind of how,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's as you were speaking this, I was like, huh, it's kind of like it's like a yoga of self-realization,
Mm,
right? But
mm,
you don't have to move your body or stretch or anything. You just lay down and do this practice and
yeah,
you know. And I've had a couple people that do a lot of like biohacking and Wim Hof and Kundalini, like these very active, dewy kind of things, like
right.
do, so much to do.
Mm,
I had someone recently, everyone's breathing, everyone's going. It's about 10 minutes into the session. She raises her hand and looks at me. And I'm like, that's never happened. What is going on here? So I come up and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I am totally lost here. Do I do three-part breath? Am I doing two in, one out? Like, what am I doing here? And I'm like, no, just look around, see how everyone's just inhaling and then exhaling. Just inhaling and exhaling. And that's it. And you just lay down and do nothing and try to relax and try to let go of this need to do things. So then, she started getting into it. At the end,
yeah,
she ended up getting there, but like I was so floored that she just, I mean, but she's kind of like she literally had just gotten back from Antarctica, like, hiking mountains in Antarctica. Like she's on a whole
mm,
other level of adventurous spirit
yeah.
and doing. So whatever, everyone's got their thing.
That's so funny. It's like the visual I'm seeing when I hear that story is like people that are doers are used to holding the control. Like I'm thinking of Nintendo right now. It's like, all right, what's the cheat code? What would I have to do? What would the buttons have to push and everything, right? And you're like, no, just you don't have to push start. Just let go of the controller and just be. Wait, no. I can't compute. You can't give me specific instructions. No, just lay down a controller and just be still. That's it. Right. And it's just a completely different just process of what it is. And so that's kind of what came to me when we were talking about that story, which is
I
like,
love
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, man, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, dude, but I just love to have you back on the show because I think there's so many different rabbit holes we can go down. But in the spirit of wrapping this particular chapter, the second to last question I want to ask you, and I ask this to all of my guests, is if the DeLorean was real, the time machine was real, and you could travel back in time. And I'll let you define what that time is, right? Whether it's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whether you want to go back before your death experience or after, whatever it is, whatever you're compelled to, what would you share with your younger self if you had that ability to speak to that younger self?
Wow. Hmm. I don't know. I think I would maybe just tell him to paint more.
Mm,
But like I wouldn't tell him anything to change his life because I don't know.
yeah,
I just really like where I'm at right now is so like we're just talking about doing nothing and relaxing.
yeah.
That's my life.
Mm,
like my life works when I just relax and just allow. It's
Hmm.
so neat.
That's a beautiful place to be. That means there's that inner peace that you've achieved to be comfortable with just being, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have an ego. I fight it all the time, you know? I think last month when we met, I had started an insurance company.
Right. Right. That's right.
Yeah, I got out
Got
of there.
it. Got it. Okay. Well, hey, it just gives you, I mean, even just that moment of pause to think about it gives you that awareness of kind of what state of mind you're in. So I get that. I felt that.
Mm.
I felt that. Okay. And so my last question to you is where can our audience find you?
Thepurewhitelight.com.
Beautiful. And that has information about you, the breathwork workshops that you host, right? You've got this new beautiful space, right? You want to talk a little bit about it? Like, please take your time on that. I want more people to know about this.
Yeah, I found this little dojo. It's I saw some little sign on the street. It said hall for rent. So I went there and I went to go. I was like, hey, I want to rent the hall, and it's a huge hall. And I told them what I want to do, and they're like, oh, you don't need the hall. Why don't you rent the Aikido studio upstairs? And I was like, there's an Aikido studio in here, right? So it's this big community center. And then upstairs, they have this Aikido room that has like swords on the walls and fully padded floor. And it's only used a few hours a week. So they basically said you can use it as much as you want. So have at it.
And this is
So
in the city of Alhambra.
yeah, it's in
Got
Alhambra.
it, got it. And then how frequently do you host these workshops?
I mean, right now I have it to do it every Sunday, but I am feeling like a different day. I don't really know, but maybe
Okay.
like Wednesday night or Friday night or
So that
Monday
so
night.
that might change. Got it. Okay.
I might still keep doing Sundays. I don't know. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think like, look, I don't know if more people come, I'll do more days or mornings or
Got it.
I have a dojo. Like I
Yeah.
have a dojo that's like they teach 2 classes a week and they're like an hour. So
Yeah. Got it.
I have a whole dojo. Like I have
Gotcha, gotcha. So, the best way for people to just know more is just go to your website, the Pure White Light, and you'll have, sort of the schedule of what the upcoming workshops are.
Yeah. So I have the public community stuff, but if somebody writes to me and just says, "Hey, can you do a thing on Wednesdays?" I would come every Wednesday. Please let me know. I would love to know like what's a day that would be good and I'll turn it on.
Beautiful, beautiful. And now I remember, when we first met, you were also doing online like Zoom sessions where people can do it, they could
Yeah.
just be at their own home. Are you still doing that as well? Like
Yeah.
what are different? Okay, so tell me a little bit more and tell the audience a little more about what that
Yeah, so
entails.
every Sunday at 7 a.m.
Pacific
people
time.
Pacific time, yeah. So it's easier for East Coast people, but yeah, people just log into Zoom and they sign a little death waiver and pay and we get to work. We
Got
start
it, got
inviting in
it. So
angels and we start breathing.
these are all obviously folks for also that are not locally based here in Southern California, but for my international listeners too, is
Yeah.
that through the use of technology, you can also participate in Rahul's breath work exercise because you also do that on a online session every Sunday, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Every Sunday.
Beautiful.
And
Okay.
look, if people want another time for that, I'm happy to open up another time for that too.
Yeah. And then do you have any social media? Are you active like in Instagram or anything like that too? Or
I have an Instagram account at the Pure White Light. I don't really post on it too much other than
got it.
just some like announcements and things like that. I've been
Yeah.
thinking of posting something, but it seems like a lot of doing.
So what would be the best way for if someone is curious to reach out to connect with you? Would it be I mean, do you have your email on your website? Is that the best way
Yeah,
to? Okay.
yeah. Yeah, just the purewhitelight at gmail.com. There's also a contact form. You can also contact me on Instagram. It's pretty easy.
Perfect. Okay. So, and I'm going to include all information on the show notes so people will have access to that. Rahul, it is such a pleasure. I really appreciate just how authentically and raw you shared your journey because it's out of this world, literally. And amazing to see that journey of, it's almost like living your second life right now. What's happened, right? And how it continues to evolve. And I would love for people to reach out if you feel compelled from the story you heard today, from what he shared, or just have any questions. Please feel free to reach out to him, because I wholeheartedly believe in your work, and whatever I can do to support it and amplify it, happy to, absolutely happy to.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to book you again on a near future episode where we go down a different rabbit hole. But thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you too.
Man, I am grateful for Rahul's sharing so generously of his personal journey and how he facilitates people's healing. There's a few takeaways I got from Rahul's story. The first takeaway is Rahul's amazing acts of service. 3 foundational pieces to Rahul's rebirth facilitation work is number 1, you're breathing in life force energy, prana. You're amplifying that within yourself. The second is birth trauma. Anything that went into your birth less than a pure divine experience is something that you can work through. And the third one is harmonizing with the reality of your mother and father. If this sparks your interest, I recommend you to check out thepurewhitelight.com and get in touch with Rahul if you feel compelled to give his rebirth facilitation a try. I've attended a workshop before, and I can tell you, it is something you do not want to miss. The second takeaway I feel is best summed up by this quote. Listen, my child, you should not and cannot fail to be aware of yourself, which is near to your heart. Cultivate that awareness. Silence and meditation are the twin aids to peace, power, and prosperity. This quote was by Mahavatar Babaji. Folks, if you enjoyed today's interview, share this episode with who you feel can resonate with Rahul's amazing story. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this Boom Vision podcast if you want to thrive together and hear transformative stories such as Rahul's. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.